at 41 years old, understood the arithmetic of a life. His job as a postal worker in Baltimore, a city of brick and grit, brought in a steady $52,000 a year before taxes. It was a number you could build a small, quiet life on. A life with a 2014 Honda Civic with 112,000 miles on it, a worn but comfortable armchair that cost $300 from a discount store 10 years ago, and a simple savings account that rarely crested four figures. It was a life he had shared with Lena, a life that had felt as rich as any banker's. But Lena was gone, taken by a sickness that didn't care about love or plans, and the arithmetic had changed. Now he was in his sister-in-law Claudette's living room, a space decorated in shades of beige and quiet judgment. The centerpiece of the gathering was a half-eaten sheet cake from Safeway, a $45 expense that felt more like an invoice than a celebration. In neat looping cursive, the frosting read, "Goodbye and good luck, Darius." It was a severance cake. He was being formally, politely, and ruthlessly excised from the family. It had been a year since Lena's passing, a year of Claudette's escalating campaign of polite exclusion. He was no longer introduced at church. His name was conveniently left off group texts about family cookouts. And his calls to check on Lena's grandmother, Mama Rose, were met with curt, dismissive replies. Claudette, in her $250 silk blouse, and with her perfectly manicured nails wrapped around a glass of $18 white wine, was the architect of this slow-motion amputation. "It's just for the best, Darius," she said, her voice a smooth, condescending balm. "You need a fresh start, and we need to heal as a family." The implication was clear. He was an obstacle to their healing, a living reminder of their loss, a loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of their bloodline. The other family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, nodded along, their eyes fixed on their plates, avoiding his gaze. They were good people mostly, but they followed the path of least resistance, and Claudette was a river of force. Darius looked at the cake. He'd had his slice. It was too sweet, the frosting thick and cloying. He thought about the 9 years of his life with Lena, the laughter, the struggles, the quiet moments that truly built a marriage. He thought about the promise he had made her in the sterile, beeping quiet of a hospital room. And he thought about the folder in the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet at his small Pigtown row house, a folder filled with 108 ghosts of a promise kept. He had no idea the contents of that folder were about to rewrite the entire family's history. For now, he just smiled a tired, thin smile. "Thank you, Claudette. The cake is delicious." He was playing his part in the fiction she had authored, the story of the poor, peripheral husband who had contributed nothing and was now being sent on his way. What they didn't know was that the real accounting was yet to come. Have you ever been made to feel small by people who were supposed to be your family? It's a unique kind of pain, a quiet humiliation that settles deep in your bones. We're going to see how one man's quiet integrity turned the tables on a whole family. The foundation of Darius's secret was laid 9 years earlier, on a humid Baltimore evening in Mama Rose's small, meticulously kept home in Cherry Hill. The house itself, a brick duplex valued then at around $280,000, was the family's entire history, captured in mortar and wood. Mama Rose, Lena's grandmother, was facing foreclosure. The 2008 crash had eaten her pension, and the adjustable rate mortgage she'd been talked into was resetting. The monthly payment was jumping to a staggering $1,100, an impossible sum for a woman living on a $900 Social Security check. The family had gathered in that same living room, the air thick with panic and the scent of the lemon pound cake Mama Rose always made. Claudette, ever the pragmatist, had a binder full of what she called solutions. They all involved selling the house. "We can get her into a nice senior apartment," Claudette had argued. tapping a glossy brochure for a facility that cost $3,000 a month. We can all chip in. The math didn't add up, and everyone knew it. They were talking about dismantling their matriarch's life, selling off her memories to the highest bidder. Later that night, long after the others had left with their empty condolences, Darius and Lena sat with Mama Rose at her worn Formica kitchen table. The silence was heavy. Lena's deep brown eyes, so full of warmth, were clouded with worry. Darius, who had been with Lena for 2 years, was just a postal worker. His salary was modest, but he saw the woman who had raised the love of his life, a woman whose hands, though gnarled with arthritis, had braided Lena's hair, baked her birthday cakes, and held her when she cried. "How much is it, Mama Rose?" Darius had asked quietly. She slid the bank notice across the table. The number, $1,100, seemed to glow with malice. Darius looked at Lena. He did the math in his head. His take-home pay was about $3,200 a month. Their rent on a small apartment was $950. Car payment, utilities, food. It would be more than tight. It would be a sacrifice that would touch every single part of their lives. No more dinners out, no new clothes, no vacations. Their dream of saving for their own small house would be deferred indefinitely. Lena started to cry softly. "We can't, baby. It's too much." Darius took her hand. His own was calloused from sorting mail and carrying heavy bags. He looked at Mama Rose, her luminous, dark skin etched with the lines of a long, hard life. She had never asked for a thing. He thought of his own mother, gone too soon, and the stability she had always craved for him. This was more than a house. It was dignity. It was peace of mind. "Yes, we can," Darius said, his voice firm. He pulled out a pen from his worn work jacket, a cheap $2 Bic, and turned over the bank notice. He started writing down their budget, subtracting, reallocating. He showed Lena how they could cut their grocery bill by $150 by avoiding brand names, how they could save $80 a month by canceling their cable, how he could work overtime shifts on weekends. By the time he was done, the back of the notice was a web of numbers, but at the bottom, there was a surplus, a tiny, fragile surplus of $75. "We can do it," he repeated, looking at Lena. "But no one can know, especially not Claudette. She'll turn it into a weapon. This is for Mama Rose, just for her." And so the agreement was made. The next day, Darius went to the bank and set up an automatic transfer. The first payment of $1,100 left his account on the first of the month, and every month after that, for 9 years, it continued. They told Mama Rose it was a loan, and she insisted on signing a simple promissory note, a document Darius typed up himself, which she kept in her old wooden Bible box. They never spoke of it again. The sacrifice was real. Darius's work boots, which should have been replaced every year, he wore for 3, resoling them himself with a $15 kit from a hardware store. Lena became an expert at finding sales, her pride not in a designer label, but in a grocery receipt that showed 40% savings. Their life was modest, but it was rich. They had Sunday dinners at Mama Rose's, the air filled with the smell of roasting chicken and the sound of gospel music from her old radio. Darius would spend Saturdays fixing a leaky pipe under her sink or patching a drafty window, the parts costing maybe $50 from Home Depot, saving her a $400 plumber's bill. He saw the peace in Mama Rose's eyes, the way she could tend to her small garden of tomatoes and collard greens without the shadow of debt hanging over her, and he knew they had made the right choice. He was giving her a home, and in return, she was giving them a bedrock of love and family that felt priceless. He never once regretted the decision, not even when Claudette would make a snide remark at Christmas about his cheap $89 Timex watch while flashing the $3,000 Movado her husband had bought her. Darius would just smile, knowing the true value of time was measured in the peaceful years he was helping to give the woman who meant everything to his wife. The cruelty began as a slow poison after Lena died. At first it was subtle, disguised as concern. Claudette would call Darius, her voice dripping with syrupy pity. "Darius, you poor thing, you must be so lost. Lena always handled everything, didn't she? The bills, the planning. You must be overwhelmed." It was a narrative she was seeding. Darius, the simple, helpless man-child, incapable without his brilliant wife. He would listen patiently on his simple track phone, a $15 a month plan, while he heard the chime of a new message on her iPhone in the background. "I'm managing, Claudette. Thank you for asking." The poison grew more potent at the first family Thanksgiving without Lena. Darius brought his signature sweet potato pie. Using the recipe Mama Rose had taught him, a recipe that cost less than $10 in ingredients, but was rich with tradition. He placed it on the dessert table next to Claudette's offering, a towering, multi-layered cake from a high-end bakery that had cost her at least $80. "Oh, Darius, you brought a pie. How rustic," Claudette said, loud enough for everyone in the kitchen to hear. "I just didn't have time to bake this year. What with managing Mother's accounts and helping with Mama Rose's doctor's appointments." She portrayed herself as the family's logistical and financial savior, the one holding everything together. She didn't mention that the help with Mama Rose's appointments consisted of arranging a $60 taxi service, a cost the family split, while Darius was the one who often left work early to drive Mama Rose himself, losing 3 hours of pay to make sure she got there and back safely. Later, as everyone sat around the sprawling dining table in her immaculate home, surrounded by her $5,000 dining set, Claudette's husband, Marcus, a decent man who worked in IT, asked Darius about his postal route. Marcus was genuinely interested. Before Darius could answer, Claudette cut in with a tinkling laugh. "Oh, Marcus, don't bore everyone with shop talk. It's a holiday." She turned to the table at large. "I'm just so grateful we're all here. It's been such a hard year. We have to make sure we're all pulling our weight to keep this family strong." Her eyes flickered toward Darius for a fraction of a second, the unspoken accusation hanging in the air like smoke. Darius felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but he just took a sip of water and said nothing. He had just made the $1,100 mortgage payment 3 weeks prior. The escalation continued. Little Zoe's 7th birthday party was the next turning point. Darius adored his niece. He'd spent weeks searching for the perfect gift, finally settling on a beautiful, hardcover collection of stories about inspiring Black women in history. A $35 book he hoped would ignite her imagination. He arrived at the party, a chaotic, joyful affair at a local park pavilion, and handed the wrapped gift to Zoe. Her eyes lit up. Claudette swept in, holding a massive, brightly wrapped box. "Zoe, sweetie, look what Mommy and Daddy got you." It was a brand new bicycle, a shimmering pink model with streamers that had cost at least $200. "And this," she said, handing Zoe a smaller box, "is from the whole family." It was a tablet, a $300 Amazon Fire tablet. We all chipped in. Darius had not been asked to chip in. He had been erased from the whole family equation. As Zoe unwrapped his book, Claudette peered over her shoulder. "Oh, a book. That's nice, Darius. Very practical." The word practical was wielded like a weapon, code for cheap and unimaginative. She then turned to her cousin. "It's just so hard for some people to keep up. I try to tell them. It's about the effort, you know." The final, most brutal confrontation happened 2 months before Mama Rose passed. Darius had stopped by the Cherry Hill house to drop off some groceries for her. about $75 worth of essentials he'd picked up after his shift. He was helping her put them away when Claudette arrived unannounced, her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car, pulling silently into the driveway. She walked in without knocking, her eyes scanning the bags on the counter. "Darius, what are you doing here?" "Just dropping off a few things for Mama Rose," he said calmly. "I see," she said, her lip curling slightly. She picked up a can of store-brand green beans, which cost 79 cents. "You know, I've been meaning to talk to you. I think it's time you started giving us some space." Mama Rose, who was sitting at the table, looked distressed. "Claudette, Darius's family." Claudette ignored her, her focus entirely on Darius. Her voice dropped to a low, conspiratorial hiss. "Lena is gone. You have no real claim here anymore. You're just hanging on. It's pathetic. She loved you, I guess, but let's be honest. She was destined for so much more. She was brilliant. She could have married a doctor or a lawyer, someone who could have given her the world. Instead, she got a man who delivers mail and lives in a tiny house in Pigtown. She settled, and you burdened her." Each word was a perfectly crafted dart, dipped in a poison of classism and contempt. To hear her say he had burdened the love of his life, the woman he had sacrificed everything for, was a wound deeper than any other. He felt the heat rise in his chest, the urge to scream, to throw the truth in her face like a bucket of cold water. He wanted to tell her about the 106 checks he had already paid. He wanted to tell her that his burden was the very roof over their grandmother's head. But he looked at Mama Rose, whose face was a mask of pain. Causing a scene would only hurt her. So he swallowed the fire. He took a deep breath, the air in the small kitchen feeling thick and suffocating. He looked Claudette directly in the eye. His voice, when it came, was quiet, devoid of the emotion raging inside him. "Lena was happy," he said. It was the only defense he needed. Was she? Claudette shot back with a dismissive laugh. Or was she just too kind to tell you the truth? "Do us all a favor, Darius. Let go. Move on. We'll take care of our own." He nodded slowly. "All right, Claudette." He turned to Mama Rose and kissed her on the forehead. "I'll call you tomorrow, Mama Rose." He walked out of the house, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Claudette standing victorious in the house he was secretly paying for. The injustice of it was a physical weight, but he carried it, just as he carried his mailbag every day. He knew a day of reckoning was coming. He just didn't know it would be so soon. For the next year, Darius perfected the art of playing dumb. He existed on the family's periphery, a ghost at the feast, absorbing their condescension while quietly upholding the central pillar of their matriarch's life. His silence was his shield and his strategy. He knew that any premature revelation would be twisted by Claudette into a self-serving plea for attention. The truth needed a proper stage, a formal setting where facts could not be drowned out by her histrionics. So he waited, and he endured. Christmas that year was a master class in his passive resistance. The family gathered at an uncle's house, a sprawling suburban home in Randallstown. The air was thick with the scent of pine and roasting turkey. Darius sat in a corner of the living room, nursing a cup of eggnog, a silent observer. He listened as Claudette held court, detailing her recent financial triumphs. "Marcus and I just refinanced the house," she announced to a captive audience of aunts and cousins. "We pulled out $60,000 in equity. We're finally getting the kitchen we deserve. A complete remodel. Viking appliances, quartz countertops. It's going to cost at least $40,000. Her brother, Kevin, a mechanic with grease permanently etched into his knuckles, whistled. "Wow, Claudie. Must be nice." "It is," she said, beaming. "You have to be smart with your money. Make it work for you." Then She turned her attention to the family's collective burden. Speaking of which, I was looking at Mama Rose's expenses. Her supplemental insurance went up another $50 a month. It's just endless. We all have to be prepared to dig a little deeper this year to help out. A wave of groans went through the room. Darius felt their eyes on him. The unspoken expectation that he, the poorest among them, would offer nothing. He just nodded along with the others, his face a mask of mild concern. He didn't say that the $50 increase was a drop in the ocean compared to the $1,100 he had transferred to the bank for her mortgage just 3 weeks ago. He let them believe he was the freeloader, the one not contributing. He watched Claudette position herself as the family's financial manager, the one bearing the emotional and administrative weight of Mama Rose's care. Every nod, every sip of his eggnog was a lie of omission, a calculated move in a long game. Another lie came in the spring. Kevin's transmission went out on his 2010 Ford F-150. The repair was going to be $2,800. He was in a panic, calling family members for a loan. He called Darius, his voice tight with stress. "D, I hate to ask, man," Kevin said, "but I'm in a real bind. Any chance you could float me a few hundred? I'll pay you back next month, I swear." Darius's heart went